Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing. And over here for you all is the person known as Alan Paull. Alan has designed many games. Alan's name. Alan is wearing spectacles on their head. Alan might one day wear two monocles instead, but I've never seen them doing so, so I doubt it very much because that would be totally impractical. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. Board games, what's what we're talking about. Okay, and for Logue's sake, it is lovely to have you with us. And I am Bez. It is bedtime in some places. We are blethering about board games, and today with Alan Paull, we are talking about tiebreakers. I think I was the one who suggested this topic, and it was because of a thing on Facebook where, in the group, Big Cock, some people were chatting about, what makes a good tiebreaker, and I thought, that's actually a really good topic for a show. Let's just have a light-hearted chat about it. I'm hoping that after the 3-hour epic stream that I had with Mark Harris about legality and ethics, this can be relatively light-hearted. Just a bit about how can we make our games that little bit better, what makes a game a bit better, and I've got some questions that we will hopefully try to address along the way.
Good morning, Sage. Good morning, Alan. Good morning.
It's J Foolsguard. I still don't know your name, J Foolsguard. I assume you're happy being called J Foolsguard. Lovely to see you. And Alan. And Alan's my number one viewer, fan. I don't know what to call them. They were here at the start. I mean, Alan's proper old school. And hello, Javier. It's lovely to see you too. Hi. All the regular faces.
I think the tiebreak is an interesting one from my perspective as well, because as you know, a lot of the games I do are war games, and you don't generally get tie breaks in war games. It's generally not very useful to have a tie break.
At some point, someone's going to be eliminated, or some objective is going to be achieved, and it's not about points being enumerated. Because that's an interesting thing. Like, I guess we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
We are ahead, I just
interjected. If you've got race games, like racing to an objective, or elimination games, or first to make the other person reach 0, which itself is a kind of race, or first to hit a certain objective or a certain number. Well, unless people can be eliminated simultaneously, I guess in a war game, what if you were able to engage in a fight and then both sides die potentially? And
you could have both sides losing, I guess. Yes. Yes. Sounds very First World War, doesn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
So that's not very light-hearted. Let's go back to the.
So talking about this, so so what I said is that if at least 2 people make photos with the L deck, because there was some demand in previous streams for a sexy calendar with the L deck. And Chris, who works for me, and I said, okay, if we get at least 2 people doing it, then I will do the rest of the photos with Chris and the L deck, and we will make it happen. So that's something that I've said, and I commit to my jokes, even if they,
So you've only got 1. You need 2. There's an opportunity for someone. Very true, Javier. Very true.
Partly Xates is done. And good morning, Alex. Lovely to see you. And we need someone else to post. So you need to convince someone. But anyway, let's move on, because to the regular features, we haven't talked about we genuinely haven't discussed before this show. What is a brilliant thing? Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? I would like to talk about squares.
Oh.
Like, not just rectangles, not just any quadrilateral, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of quadrilaterals out there. But, like, I'm talking specifically the square. I mean, I like square tiles in Carcassonne because you can rotate them, you know, in 4 orientations. That's pretty good. And, you know, depending on the tile, obviously, some of them, there might only be functionally 2 or even 1 of them, depending on the tile in question. But, you know, they tessellate very nicely, squares, and, you know, give you a bunch of options when placing things. Also, I think that's the limit of why I love squares, to be honest.
I think that the good thing about squares is that people are very, very familiar with squares.
Mm.
I mean, in war games, squares are very important. Hexes, hexes. If you give a hex grid, people have to think about it. Whereas squares, people are familiar with square grid. You know, it's along the bottom and up the side, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. There's oh wow, and you've
dancing
got
squares.
Jess.
I like that.
Hello, okay. Jess. It is lovely to see you. And yes, we've got square dancing, where people kind of in imaginary squares. And I believe that in quite often, even if you're in a rueda, they say, okay, keep to your own little square. And
we have basic things like noughts and crosses. You know, that's all squares, isn't it? So
yeah. I mean, like, there's only 1 square normally when you draw it on a grid, let's be honest. 2 actually draws a square around the outside. 2 that way, 2 that way.
Fair enough, yeah.
But what I do want to think about is, even though they're rounded, I think we could still consider them squares. And if you've got square cards, you know, that's just giving a bit of novelty. Ooh, you know, it's a very specific type of rectangle, not just, you know, it's the just a wee bit different.
Yeah, good, excellent. I like squares. Yes.
And there's Chris. We were talking about Chris because sexy calendar apparently. So
shall I do my brilliant thing? Can I do my brilliant thing as well?
Oh, that goes into the recent highlights. Oh, the brilliant thing is meant to be like a brilliant thing that everyone just says how brilliant squares are.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And you could really change the rules if the edges were the boundary to an infinite play area. I think what Alex is saying is like maybe in a real world game like TIG, or indeed for Carcassonne, where normally you can play wherever you want. But then by giving it a limit, that definitely changes it. Now let's talk about what you've been enjoying and talk about recent highlights, playing games and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. So you go first. What have you enjoyed?
Well, not games, but we actually went to the beach on Friday.
Lovely.
It was a really, really good day. We went up to the Norfolk coast because we're an hour and a half or so away from Hunstanton here. So I went up there and had a walk along the beach. It was actually fine and sandy. We could get sand in our toes. Didn't actually paddle, but yeah, near enough. And walked along the coast through a nature reserve up there, it was really good day. We were all completely socially distant. There were very, very few people. We specifically went to places where there weren't very many people at all. So, I mean, at one point, we were walking along the beach and thinking, we're only 200-meter distance here. We were counting the households. At one point, we had like only three or four households anywhere in sight. Literally, you could see like a couple of kilometers one way and a couple of kilometers in the other. And it was up to about 5 or 6 households in that distance. So we were fine in terms of keeping this.
Sounds lovely.
It was a lovely day. It was a lovely day.
That does sound brilliant. And a quick hello to Elaine. It's lovely to see you with us. And we are just talking about recent highlights. And yeah, feel free to share anything you've been enjoying, anyone in the comments, in the past day, or if if you're a bit less regular, feel free to catch us up with what's been the best things that have been happening in your life? I mean, I didn't get to go to the beach like Alan, unfortunately. I did do a bit more sorts of sanding and stuff outside, you know, just chatting with my parents as the sun went down. That was actually quite a nice thing. I also did a wee bit of playing of an L game, which doesn't really have a title. It was a solitaire game, and I got 9 out of 12, which I don't know if that's good or bad. It feels like 12 out of 12 needs to be the victory condition. But then I was like, yeah, this is too big, and I might, yeah. But I feel like it is achievable, maybe, but I just wasn't quite good enough. So I might play it again, but we'll see. Honestly, at this point, if I don't have any desire to play my own game again, then why would anyone else? It's probably
good point. Yes. if after only a few plays, if after only a very few plays, you actually aren't prepared to play it again, it's probably a sign.
Alan Outzen has enjoyed
Hurrah!
their new copy of Lux Eterna, which is a game by Tony Boydell and can't remember who did the artwork.
Alex Lee.
Thank you very much. That's the name. Amazing art treatments on that. Yeah, all the colors. Yeah, I've
got a copy here somewhere.
And then, yeah, published by Surprise Terror Games, which is now just you and
from After Essen, it'll be just Charlie and me. Yeah.
Yeah, we had this big announcement. Like, this is a recent. Is this a recent highlight, or is it a recent news?
Recent news, yes. After 20 years, we've decided that we will
part ways.
Part ways. Oh, we're still friends. It's not a. There's no animosity.
So Tony Boydell is still part of SSG because my understanding is it's Tony, Karen.
That's right.
You and Charlie are the 4 stakeholders.
Yes.
And is that still going to be true, even though Tony is no longer in a management position, so to speak?
No. We're having a clean break, so that the company will be owned by Charlie and myself. And we will take forward whatever we want to do with Surprise Terror Games. And Tony will. Well, to be fair, Tony has been publishing larger games recently, things like Alibari, what have you. And with Surprise Terror, we haven't got the funds to do big box games. So one of the reasons we're splitting up is because we're doing different things. I mean, I'm doing a lot of the kind of pocket campaign stuff. Tony's doing other things. So, of course, if Tony wants to submit games to Surprise Terror, then we will obviously give them a very favourable consideration. There's no doubt about that. So it's quite possible that we would still publish some Tony Boydell games. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, Tony does make some quite fun games. I mean, I played at January. What was that one about grabbing tickets? I don't think it's a Surprise Terror Games. It's a really quick reaction game.
Yes, I can't remember the name of it. Yes, played it at Gathering of Chums. That's right. I can't remember.
But anyway, Tony makes some fun games. You make some fun games.
Tony's also done. He's recently done a game called Race the Rails, which has just been published by Gibson's for Transport for London. It's a commission. So he's actually got a game with the London Underground logo on it through Gibson's, which is nice. So
that is
simple rail game. Funnily enough, Tony does quite like rail games, which is fine. Yeah, it's fine.
This is another recent highlight of mine. Just seeing this like about a minute ago. So this is Sate's sexy L deck thing. So yeah.
Oh, that's very good.
I assumed that the photo bits of it had to be cut off to fit the square format of Instagram, unfortunately. But yeah, sure. This could definitely happen. I mean, it'll be like a print on demand thing or a PDF thing or something.
Oh,
No,
right.
that doesn't happen on Instagram. That's only a Twitter thing, clicking for it to go bigger. So yeah, anyone else wants to share any recent highlights? They can. Anything else that you wanted to talk about, Alan?
What else am I playing? I'm currently playing another game of Quartermaster General Play by Forum, which is fun. And we've been playing a little bit on Yucatan. So Castles of Burgundy seems to be one I'm playing a lot of, and Oregon. And Lemmings, I'm losing a lot at Lemmings, which is fun.
Wait, it's old school original Lemmings.
Yes. No, this is the board game. Sebastian Bleasdale's board game.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I thought you meant the one that was like, what was it? Like, it wasn't Centauri. It was like Amstrad or something originally.
I don't think I ever actually played that game.
You never played Lemmings nor Lemmings 2?
I think I'm culturally deprived. I don't think I've played them. That's what I've been playing. On computer games. Yeah, I've just started a major thing with my wargaming friend Graham Tate. We're playing War Plan on Steam, which is a big World War II. It's got most things in it type of game. It's really complicated and it's got proper logistics. Oh dear, yes, it's going to be fun once we've learned out how to play it. That's fairly major commitment, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lots of games that fall into that pattern of okay, you want to give it a fair few days, but well, maybe not days, but at least hours.
There seems to be this predilection amongst computer games and video games to go for massive and masses of detail and almost like forcing players to micromanage, which doesn't happen. I mean, it does happen in board war games a lot. I mean, there used to be. There's the famous campaign for North Africa board war game where it was like. For the Italians, you even had to have water for your pasta. There's rules for that. But
that's like almost the archetypal. Whoa, let's see how detailed we can get this. I mean, campaign for North Africa is an anomaly.
Yes, but I think with board games, less than video and computer games, board games we're always trying to cut things out until we've got everything that we need and only what we need. Whereas that doesn't seem to happen in computer games or video games. It's basically, I'm not saying bung everything in. It's basically put in as much detail as you can because
there's
it gives it more depth, perhaps. Yeah, there are. Yeah.
I mean, we talked about going back to what we were talking about yesterday. Clearly, Serlin comes from a video game format. And hello, Doug. I think Doug. We met at Essen. When was it? 2018. Something like that, maybe 2017, I can't remember. But yeah, it's lovely to see you. And we are just chatting about, pardon me, we were just finishing up recent highlights. Whether your recent highlight is seeing a picture of someone in the bath doing that, someone finishing a super long project at work, I had to call lots of people, which was hard for me, but now it's over and I'm back to just doing data entry, mainly because I can watch this stream properly whilst working. Jay Fulsgaard, having an apartment for himself these days, really enjoying it. Yay, that sounds awesome. PSC is the closest publisher to Aquasulis,
really?
But unfortunately never crossed paths.
Oh, they're a good bunch at PSC. I like them a lot, yeah.
It says Alex says that in The Last of Us, all the weapons starting to degrade, and they must be very badly made. I mean, sometimes you're so satisfied. Oh my god, I've got this mechanism for degrading things. I must use it, and then you kind of overdo it, and it never makes any thematic sense. And apparently, it was 2017 that we met.
Oh right.
But Doug, great, lovely person. And I remember this was when everything went wrong, and I believe Essen hadn't delivered our furniture until
Oh, right.
Friday afternoon, I want to say.
Yeah.
So that's not good at all. Anyway, let's move slightly towards the main topic of tiebreakers and start with the questionably quick questions. So for the next 2 minutes or however long, we will have some questionably quick questions. For example, Alan Paull, where
Yeah.
exactly are you right now and what time is it?
I could give you the three-word thingy of my room if you like, but I'd have to do that on the phone. I'm sitting on my chair. So what was the second part of the question? You asked two questions. Where am I?
I asked where exactly are you? Are you
exactly
like? I know you're in England, but like because I talk to people from all over the world.
I'm upstairs in my house. There you go.
Somewhere in England.
Somewhere in England. I'm in the United Kingdom. I'm unfortunately not in the European Union. It's a bit of a shame.
Aren't we still part of the European Union?
No, we're not. We left. Don't forget, we're still meeting the rules, but we did actually leave. Yeah. So, sorry. We're supposed to be positive today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I'm PE 28 2SL. There you go.
Oh wow, that's quite specific. So everyone can go and wander up and down Allen streets now.
Yeah,
but
you can.
Please don't. Yeah. That would be a bit.
It's an interesting thing that, of course, because if I can find it, here we go. I can tell you.
I mean, please don't give your actual address or anything on.
No.
City
have you used this What 3 Words app?
No.
I'm in seasons majoring salary.
Huh.
What they do is they've. I think it's something like 5 meter squares? I can't remember the size of the squares. Every single 5 meter square on the surface of the planet has its own 3-word identifier.
Huh.
So with the app, you can say exactly where you are.
So does that mean that someone could put in those words and come to your house?
Yes.
They
could.
I mean,
it's generally used if you're out if you break down in the country somewhere and you don't know where the hell you are. Yeah, for emergency services, you can just tell them where you are by the 3-word app thing.
That's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah,
so my second question was, what time is it right now for where you are? Which is going to be the same time as where I am, to be fair.
It's 10:23.
Have you ever played Geoguessr?
No.
Okay. Would you rather have a duck-sized meatball or a meatball-sized duck? This question's from Alex.
A duck-sized meatball, because then I could put it out the front of the house and stick it there as a I'm a game player ornament. I'd want a larger one than a duck-sized meatball, actually. I want a cow-sized meatball.
Or maybe an elephant-sized meatball.
Yes, maybe. Yeah.
Although then it would kind of get in the way of the cards.
Be a good start player, Marco, wouldn't it?
You couldn't really put it in front of someone. And yeah, finishing up with the questionably quick questions. Alex says Geoguessr is great. You have to try and work out where you are in the world by wandering around Google Street View.
Oh, right. That sounds fun. Yeah.
So you're kind of seeing the thing and you're like, oh, based on the things I see around me. So, yeah, could you describe in as much or as little detail as you would like a recent day? And I am going to just have to quickly plug in, and I do apologize.
A recent day. What happened? That's actually quite difficult for me. Well, what did I do? Well, I could describe my Friday, which would be a good one. We drove up to Hunstanton on the coast. We actually looked around Hunstanton itself, which is a seaside resort. I've not been to a seaside resort for ages. And we managed to avoid all the all the arcades and things like that at Hunstanton, and walked along the seafront, the promenade. Hi, Bears. Just talking about my promenading on Friday.
Oh no, I'm
You can
still
hear it
plugged
still.
in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that was quite good fun. And when we walked back towards the arcade area, it was becoming much more crowded, so we decided we'd move on. And actually, one of the great things we had was we actually had fish and chips in a restaurant at a proper seaside restaurant. Yeah, it was great.
Ooh.
Fish and chips.
Yeah,
That was what we were looking forward to a lot, actually.
Ooh, I'm hoping to have fish and chips, later in this week. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I don't know, but sometime this week, I am going to have fish and chips.
And I'll
talk about that at the end of this show, probably.
I had proper mushy peas with mine, but Charlie doesn't like mushy peas. So.
Well, this is a time when we're getting into the main topic of tiebreakers. And this is where I remind everyone to please feel free to comment, ask questions, give it to a fun like follow. And yeah.
Where do you want to start then, Bez?
Let's start with a definition. Let's go with the usual way.
Okay.
So for me, I guess a game has some central rules, and then sometimes the kind of when you're just like if it's like okay, for let's say you had a game where you were collecting cows and you used cows with your money. Okay, let's imagine that the game's all about getting cows. The most cows wins. And then the money could be a tiebreaker. But if you had every cow is worth 100 points and money is 1-to-1, you add it together, then suddenly it's not technically a tiebreaker, is it?
No, I think that in a way, what a tiebreaker is to.
Do you not see what I'm trying to do with this hypothetical example?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I know. Yes, I understand what you mean there. What we're saying is it's to do with victory points, isn't it? Aren't we talking about that? To do with victory points. It's really saying we've both got our victory points at the same level. We've both done stuff. We've got our cows. If it's cows or victory points, we've done our stuff to the same ability over the period of the game, and because players often don't like draws. They don't like ties. I think maybe it's an American thing. I don't know. They don't like ties, so we have to have somewhere to decide between. Now, there is that idea you could just convert something into cows. So you could say, right, well, I got a load of money. We use money to buy cows, but I didn't manage to buy cows during the game. Therefore, I'll convert all my money to cows or cows to money, and we'll use that as a tie break.
Hello, Prey. It's lovely to see you. Now all the global team is back together. Prey, myself, and Xate. The winning team. That's my claim to fame now. We were the winning online scavenger hunt team for Shelfapalooza.
Oh, right. I see.
Mainly due to Xate. But
ties are good for keeping your cables sorted out, to be honest. And if they break, then your cables go everywhere, which isn't what you want at all. Yeah.
Like it's all about as you say, the rules themselves want to be as simple as possible. So, I mean, in all seriousness, I think at what point do you make something into a core part of scoring the game? Because certainly you could say that lots of the things in Agricola could have been put into a tiebreaker, but instead of putting it all into one overall score.
Yes, I think a major thing there is it's about what is the game about? Yeah, like your cow example is a good one, isn't it? If the game is about acquiring lots and lots of cows, then you need if we've got the same number of cows at the end of the game, we want to have something as a tiebreak which relates to our achievement of trying to get more cows. So if you use money to buy cows, then you could see that, okay, you could have, if we've got the same number of cows, you could say, well, there's residual money. It wasn't enough to buy a cow, but I've got more than you, therefore I win because I could have bought half a cow or whatever. So it's got
maybe
to relate.
You didn't get the cow buying action, but
Yeah.
whatever.
So that, I think, if we're talking about what makes a good tiebreaker, we're really talking about definition, aren't we, at the moment still? But it's something which will relate to the victory conditions and it relates to the victory conditions and will enable you to differentiate between two people who've got the same amount of stuff for the main objective. So I think we're saying differentiating between the main objective of the game and the fine detail.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like you want to keep the core rules as simple as possible. So in that hypothetical cow buyer, let's call it cow buyer, from calves to steers. I don't know.
Yes, why not?
So in cow buyer, two scenarios. We, as a designer, you make the decision. Okay, do you say cows are worth 100 victory points and money is worth 1 to 1? In which case, maybe you've got 7 money, so it's 107. So it's clearly, or do you actually say the winner is the person with the most cows? If there's a tie, then the tied players compare their money, and the person with the most money wins the tie.
I think you need to go back a step and say, do we need a tie break? What is the tie break is a design decision. So what is the purpose of the tie break? So for example, in the cows, if from cows to steers, by the end of the game, one of you's got 1,500 cows and the other one's got around 1,500 cows, then the differentiate and the range might be, say, I don't know, the range might be 1,000 to 2,000 cows. Now, in that case, if we've both got 1,451 cows by the end of the game, a tie break is probably stretching things. Why would you, if you've got that amount of differentiation, the chance for tie is absolutely minuscule. So you probably don't want to have a tie break. It just becomes a bit finicky. So in that case,
whereas if it was like, okay, in a typical, by the way, apparently some people are saying that there's a little echo. Javier has also said there's an echo apparently when I'm speaking. Am I definitely coming through your headphones, Alan?
Let's just have a look.
Oh, sound is good for Alan, Alan Oughton, just to avoid confusion. But if sound is bad for anyone else, feel free to help us with troubleshooting, so let us know. But yeah, in a hypothetical example, let's say in a typical game, you get between 5 and 12 cows. Then, okay, suddenly the possibility of a tie becomes more significant, and maybe you do want that secondary tiebreaker. Someone said there's a wide cultural difference between American and European attitudes towards tiebreakers due to their history of sports.
Yes, that's a good point, because I mean the Americans initially didn't like soccer because you get 0-0 draws, which they kind of automatically thought the 0-0 draw to an American seems a bit odd. Because they've got American football, which you don't often get ties, do you? And baseball, you don't often get ties.
American football lends itself incredibly well to video games, or because it's quite surprising how much strategy there is and how much strategy the person running the team is making, if you know what I mean. I mean, sure, there's a lot of physical prowess, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of, comparing your aggressive play to their defensive play. And
I've played Status Pro American Football, the game, Avalon Hill's game. That's quite nice. It takes longer to play than a game of American football, but it's quite a good reflection of that.
Alex says maybe your mic is picking me up when your volume is low, but it's not too bad.
I can turn mine down a bit.
Maybe don't worry about it too much.
I've turned mine down a bit. so that maybe I don't pick it up quite so badly.
So, yeah, the definition, fundamentally, you follow the main rules of the game, and then there's this little peripheral bit at the end, this extra addendum to say, hey, if you want to work out who actually won, because you don't want to both say we are both winners or we're both losers, if you don't want that to happen, it's a way of eliminating or at least reducing that possibility.
Yeah. Yes. And the purpose is to differentiate between the winners, or to differentiate between the positions if it's necessary. I actually quite like some games without a tiebreak, and I think the more variation in results you have at the end of the game, the less you need a tiebreak. And some games I think could probably have done without a tiebreak. Let's be honest.
Sorry. Yeah. Well done, Xate. You made me laugh. Yeah. If that doesn't work, giving them a little hit like an old TV. So best way to turn Bez off. Frank pan into the head. Or what type of little hit? Yeah. So, Alan Oughton is not sure that they like those sorts of games anyway. I mean, what sorts of games are you talking about? Are you talking about cow buying games or? Doug asks, if there is a tie, can the game go into overtime?
That's it. Now, I'm glad you mentioned
American football. Oh, by the way, it's 2:37 a.m. here in Hollywood, California.
Wow. Okay.
Lovely to. I hope that you're doing okay generally.
This game here. Oh, crikey, sorry.
Let me make you bigger.
Space. This doesn't have a tie break. If you're tied at the end, it has a target of 40 victory points to win. If you're tied at the end, you just play another round. And if you're still tied, you play another round. So you keep playing until you've got a winner. That's nice. So it doesn't have a tie break.
That's a really interesting.
That's quite unusual, isn't it? I think.
I mean, this notion of overtime, because that's the thing that football, or soccer as the Americans call it, but I've still got the issue with American football being called football. When you use your hands, for goodness sake, for most of the game, you're not connecting feet with balls. I mean, football, you kick the ball, surely. Yes, anyway, sorry, tangents aside. Yes, overtime, World Cup for football. When people are having to get knocked out, not in the qualifiers, but in the kind of knock-you-outy bit. And that's how it goes. Like, first it's penalties. First it's overtime, and then it's penalties. And people can say, well, at this point, you're kind of playing an entirely different game. And that can be a problem with tie breaks, when it feels like it's almost in retrospect. I've not seen any board game that actually does that. That's okay, you've tied the main game, now we're going to play this little sub-game to...
I've seen a game where it says if you tie, you just play another game to decide who won.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that's a bit of humour, I suppose. That's the level of game design humour.
I would like to pose Alex's question to everyone watching. I don't know how to do polls. I mean, I tried to type in the / command, but just everyone tell me, how does the possibility of sharing the victory make you feel in the game? Because I think it would be nice if everyone just answers it, and I'll just read out everyone's answer, because this is what the presence of tie breaks actually means. Like, for me, it's pretty much about how likely is that possibility. Because if half the games result in a tie, then I might feel like, okay, what was the point in playing? But if, a tie is like, okay, 1 in 100 games ends up in a tie, then it's almost like a moment to be savored. It's like, oh, this was a lovely, magical thing. I think 2 nights ago, I played Tripel with my mum and dad, and then we got to a tie. Like, I was losing, my mum and dad were winning. It's like, okay, let's stop now. And my mum was like, oh, no, we can play again. play, and maybe you'll win. And then we played another round, added up all the scores, and once again, the scores that we got during that round were pretty similar. So my mum and dad again were tied perfectly, and I was losing. So for me, actually, that was quite a nice moment.
I think there's a key point there in the comments from Prey4J9. If you're playing a social game, then sharing victories seems to be much more acceptable. If you're playing really competitively, or tournaments, obviously, if you're playing tournaments and things, you need to have a decision. For example, this one, Azul, Summer Pavilion, and happen to be looking through games and finding things with tie breaks and without. This is more of a social game than a highly competitive, nail-biting thing, and that basically has shared victory. If you tie, you share victory. Now there are, mind you, there are quite a lot of points in it. So in a sense, if you've got a lot more victory points, and you happen to have the same number at the end, sharing victory seems fine to me, I think. Now, if I contrast that with Terraforming Mars. Now, Terraforming Mars, I don't think you have you played Terraforming Mars, Bez? I'm not sure.
I have, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Most people in this chat have. Let's assume that everyone in this chat has played Terraforming Mars.
Well, in Terraforming Mars, you end up with loads.
Excited by it.
you get loads of points, so the chances of a tie are quite small, and yet the designer felt it necessary to have a tie break, and the tie break is how much money you've got at the end of the game. Now, to me, that's the example of a bad tie break.
Really?
Yeah, because
isn't money a kind of fairly natural thing? I guess you're getting a whole bunch of resources.
Well, to be fair, it's the opposite of natural. It's man-made. But yeah, okay.
Sure.
But the problem is with
intuitive.
It may be. It's only intuitive because a lot of games use money as a tiebreak, I think. I don't think it works as a. Oh, I agree with Sate there, because you may have been collecting other things and not relying on huge amounts of money. Particularly
you've got like about 7 resources, of which money
six different resources. Yeah, so you may, if you were concentrating on, I don't know, if you were concentrating on heat or well, if you were concentrating on metals, like if you were concentrating on steel and titanium, you may have loads of it left at the end of the game, because often you can't necessarily find all the cards to use it, and you may not have as much money or as much income as somebody else, but you'll lose on the tiebreak. Mind you, to be fair, I mean, I have had a game where I won on 1 money on the tiebreak. So
I mean, it's kind of, yeah. In that situation, it feels like you've won because you chose the money strategy, whereas someone else went with the heat strategy.
Well, it feels more random than that to me, because it feels like the random nature. Well, not random. If you've both got the same number of points at the end of Terraforming Mars, that means you've played pretty much equally. Yeah, I like that, Alan. Flip a themed coin. Yeah.
And
something like that. So what I was wondering is
that other resources are worth 2 or 3 money.
Yeah.
What's having in them in the end is pointless.
So I don't know quite why they thought it necessary to put a tiebreak in Terraforming Mars. This is one of the things I said, that the tiebreak in the game, to work properly, it needs to be in line with what your objective is in the game. So with the cows, with our lovely cow to steer game, calf to steer game, if you are using money to buy cows, it kind of works to have money at the end as the tiebreak. If a cow costs 100 money and I've got 7 money and you've got 8 money, you would win on the money, because you could potentially buy a little bit more cow. You could buy an extra steak, which I can't buy. So that makes sense. But with Terraforming Mars, having more, I might be sitting at the end of the game with Terraforming Mars with enough steel to, I don't know, buy a massive metal.
So what we've decided here is that you can't just be focusing on one tiny aspect of the game. it has to be intuitive, but it has to reflect everything that you've done in the game. And obviously, it has to be a bit more fine-grained.
Yeah. Now, the other way to do it is to convert all the resources to the main thing that you're going to be using. So, for example, they could have said in Terraforming Mars, convert all the resources you've currently got to money, and then decide on that money is the tiebreaker, and that would have been kind of fair. The trouble is that would have been so fiddly in Terraforming Mars, you couldn't really contemplate that. But there are games that that do that. Energy Empire, which I've got here, which is, if you haven't played Energy Empire, play it, because it's really, really fabulous. A fabulous game. We discussed it the other day, didn't we? We discussed Energy Empire about 2 or 3 episodes ago, and this has the tie break where you convert everything. So basically, you convert. Oh, interestingly, you convert money into resource. So you divide your money by 2, round down. You add the plastic, steel, science, and oil, and that money divided by 2 together. And that gives you your tie break value. So it is saying the point of Energy Empire is to get stuff and then use stuff. So if you need a tie break, having loads of stuff, regardless of what the stuff is good. And it's helpful that the game itself has got that trading aspect where those resources like plastic and steel and stuff, you can you can use an action to trade them on a one-on-one basis. So they have equated those resources in value. So that does make perfect sense.
If we can pause for a moment to catch up with the chat regarding the possibility of someone sharing the victory. Alan Outson says, no, first across the line type games for me. None of this counting up at the end rubbish, which makes sense. So yeah, Space Base sounds like some new fancy music, Sean. And say tasks, if you were to get to the end of Space Base, can someone have 39, 2 other players have 40, and then you play another round to eliminate tiebreak, and then the one with... Okay.
You can, which is nice, which is fascinating as well, yeah.
We've got a suggestion for American football being called Handegg, which I can sort of see. It is sort of more of an egg-shaped ball. And yeah, we've got Javier who says sudden death used to be used. Yeah, that's true. Where they used to have golden goal, where basically, okay, it's a tie. Well, you just keep playing until someone scores a goal, and then it stops.
Which is okay, but indeterminate length, unfortunately, indeterminate duration, which I think was why they dropped it. You don't really want to have another 3 hours before somebody scores.
I mean, you could have golden goal with a cap on it and then go to penalties, because you still need to end up going to penalties. And with the penalties, each team does a certain number of penalty shootouts. And then, okay, if one team has more than the other, fine. But if it's a tie there, then it goes into sudden elimination, essentially, where you take turns doing it until one team messes up and the other team doesn't.
I can see why they've done penalties. At least they can measure the amount of time, roughly measure the amount of time it's going to take. And since all these games, this type of sport is designed for TV, they do want to have that. That's like America. That's why American football is like it is, isn't it? It's because American football is pretty much designed for television. So the actual duration of the activity on the field in American football is 1 hour. Now the game itself might take 2 hours or whatever because of all the breaks, but it is designed for those ad breaks, isn't it? Really? So
yeah, and the whole notion of like the Super Bowl, where you have this amazing halftime performance with like some of the biggest musical acts of the century. Well, if not the biggest musical acts of the century, frankly. And but it strikes me as a bit weird with penalty shootouts, because you're rewarding a strong attackers, one particular skill of shooting for the goal. That's what you're rewarding, and the skill of the goalie defending that goal. Sure, those are the highlight moments of the game, but there's so much more to it. It's about the passing, about your positioning, and you're ignoring all of those things.
But
and
at least it is part of the football skill.
That's true.
It's not just tossing a coin, which you could do. Which I think there have been games where they have decided by toss of a coin, haven't they, or something? Can't remember now.
I'm not familiar with everything in the history of football, so someone with more expertise will have to happen. We've got questions about what if two people cross the line at the same time. I mean, this brings us to the example of war games where two people could die and both lose at the same time, we decided.
Yes.
Well, is that actually a real... I'm not saying it's a plausible situation, but is it mathematically possible in any war games you can think of?
You can have people who both lose at the same time. That's yes. In which case you don't need to adjudicate who's won, because nobody's won. There's no point in having a tie break to see who lost first if you both effectively lost at the same time. We don't really care, do we? Because we don't really care. You just move on to the next game. Now, when you're talking about tie breaks, you can't avoid, I think, talking about this game here.
Stan?
King of Siam. So I've got the this is König von Siam, King of Siam by Pierre Sylvester. Excuse me. Now the reason why is because we've got, I can't show you this, but this has got tie breaks. This is your ultimate tie breaky thing. I don't know if anybody else really knows King of Siam is a really good abstract game. Pierre Sylvester designs really excellent mainly abstract game. Okay, it has got a Siam theme. In this game, what you're trying to do is you're trying to control the 8 provinces of Siam, or at least, yeah, that's right. That's the same. I think it's the same type of thing as the King is Dead. Yeah, you're trying to take control of the 8 provinces of Siam, or at least a majority of them. Now, if you can get a majority of the provinces, so if you get 5 out of the 8, you win. But that's quite unlikely because players have the same. They have the same hand of cards each, and you're playing one card around, things like this. I won't go into the detail of that. So ties are quite likely if you're looking at just the number of provinces. So there's a large number of tie breaks. So basically, there's part of the game is that the British can control provinces. And if the British control 4 of the 8 provinces, then Siam becomes a British colony, and you end the game at that point and look at who has got faction. So basically, it says here, if Siam does not become a British colony, then the game ends after all 8 power struggles have been completed, which is each turn you do a power struggle for a province. In this case, Siam is reigned by the faction which controls the most provinces. If factions are tied, the winning faction is whichever of the tied factions was the last to gain control of a province. Nice and simple. Okay. If Siam is a British colony, the winning player is the one who has the most complete sets of followers, and that's because when you place pieces, you are placing blue, red, and yellow. So basically, if it's a British colony, you win if you've got most sets of blue, red, and yellow pieces. But if there's a tie on that, then the tied player who played an action card last wins. Okay. If Siam is not a British colony, this is where it gets critical, then the winning player is the one who has gathered most followers of the winning faction. And if you're tied for that, victory goes to the tie player who has the most followers of the second rank faction. And if there's still a tie, the still tied player who played an action card last loses. Okay, so there's about 7 or 8 different tie breaks in there. So basically, these are all key to how you, because it's an abstract game, these are all key to how you actually play the game. Particularly,
I mean, it sounds like quite a lot to grok, frankly.
It is.
But like the point, a lot to internalize, and that seems like one of the problems with tie breaks.
I don't think in this game it isn't really a in this game, it's not really a problem because it's like the whole of the game is, can I engineer this so that if there is a tie, which is moderately likely, I'm in the best position to win the tiebreak. So the key decision you're making there as you're playing the game is, do I want Sand to be a British colony or not? Because it directly affects the tiebreak. And that's quite a nice decision. So you can, if you've got really good players, you know, getting to that fourth British colony could be the actual critical play. And the key thing is whether you played an action card last. Because if it's not a British colony, you don't want to play the last action card. If it's going to be a British colony, you do. So that I think that's a really, I mean, it does make people's head hurt when you first start to play that type of game. But once you get your head around it, it does make sense, and it strongly influences how you play. So in some senses, it's almost not just a tagged on tiebreak. It's an integral part of the game design, which is why I quite like that idea. Anyway,
yeah, it's like definitely it feels like whatever the tiebreak is, it needs to be part of it, as you say,
it needs to be integrated.
Be something that people can consider. I know that I appreciate all the chat about people making letters, leathers, I was about to say, for the cow game. But yeah, we want little drawings of cows. I mean, you could have the letters could be made of little cows. Why not? Javier wants to shout out to Lords of Zidit, which I have, but still not played.
Oh.
I think it's 3 players minimum, isn't it? Otherwise, I was going to say, maybe Chris could be talked into playing it at some point. But yeah, there's a crazy scoring system where, ties are extremely unlikely because you're essentially, it feels like the ties and comparing all these attributes are part of the game, if you know what I mean. If memory serves. Javier, have you played this one?
I've not played that, no.
Maybe Javier can tell us a bit more about the exact situation with this, because I've not even read the full rule sheet, but I'm wanting to get it onto the table. Apparently there was a football game once where they got to 16 penalties. And we've got some things, and it is thematic for a war game. Javier says, yes, it's 3 to 5 players. Alan Alton says, any games where the tiebreak result is agreed at the start of the game, so who wins if it ends in a tie? In football, cup competitions have the away goals rule to help with this.
Yes, I think. Again, I think that's strongly influenced by television, because you want to minimize with football. They want to minimize ties, particularly for American audiences.
Do you know the tiebreak can go? You know the tiebreak can go, right?
Tiebreaking go? No, I don't. What was the tiebreak?
Basically, there is none because the start player gets something. No, the second player gets something and a half points advantage.
Right. We did that in the Ming Voyages. I think we said if it's a tie, the barbarian wins.
Okay, so
barbarian
there you go.
Player wins. Yeah.
So that's exactly what Alan's talking about.
Well, if it's asymmetric, then that's good. If it's not an asymmetric game, that's much more difficult, because you'll feel that you're then
game where there's turns being taken, surely by its nature is asymmetric. Like you could say, like in Go. The reason that, like, they've just added this little thing called commie. I can't remember right now what commie is meant to be for a fair match. I think it's something like 6.5. But basically, if you take turns placing stones and black starts off with 0 stones on the board, then it's clearly better to go first. And so that's why the other player gets X and a half points.
Yeah, that's if there's a perceived first player advantage. But of course, in a lot of games, you're designing so that you counteract the potential first player advantage. So like with Lemmings, referring back to Lemmings, if you're first player in Lemmings, you only get three. Well, you get less cards, and then the people around the table get one more card than the previous player. So that's to counteract the effect of a start player advantage. So the idea there is that because it's a race game, by the end, it's who crosses the line first with both their Lemmings that wins. So you don't complete a round. You don't do equal numbers of turns specifically. So in that case, there needs to be that the players need to accept that everybody who plays the game has got an equal chance of winning. And it's their skill or whatever, or luck of a draw, that will determine things. Yeah.
Good night, Prey, and I hope you get to sleep well. And I think it's surprising how many games are actually asymmetric, not in the way that we would think about it with drastically different player powers, but just by virtue of, hey, not everyone takes their turns at the same time. And sure, you could say, okay, well, you get 1 extra food, you get 2 extra food, you get 3 extra food, or whatever, to try and balance that. But even despite that, I don't know exactly, but maybe if you've done this best balancing that you can, you might be able to say, okay, we've now actually put it through tournament play, and after so many years, because let's remember that Commie has for Go is continuing to evolve. Yes, it has changed in the past 100 years. It has changed. I can't remember the last time that Commie was changed, but it's continuing to change as they say, hey, is it 6.5 or is it 7.5 points for a perfectly fair game? And so, the fundamental rules haven't changed for thousands of years, don't get me wrong. But this kind of tweaking, and so maybe at a certain point, someone might say, hey, okay, these are the rules for terraforming Mars, but if there's a tie break, then the person who's later in the turn order
yes, that kind of thing will be good. Yes, I agree, yeah. The other way, if I can blow my own trumpet a bit, we used in my game Confucius, which is published in 2008. With this game, I designed that so that there weren't going to be. I deliberately designed it so there's not masses and masses of victory points. So I wanted it to be a limited number of victory points. So that I think up to about the winning player will get up to about 16 or so from memory. It might be 16, 8, something. So it's not, you're not getting dozens, and it's not Russian railroads. You're not getting hundreds of points. So in that case, a tie is more likely than if you've got loads and loads of points coming in. So what I said with that game is, if there's a tie, then the person who is the admiral wins, because Confucius has got these. It's got the same kind of.
And that's even if the admiral isn't involved in the tie.
Even if the admiral is not involved in the tie,
to kind of try to make a tie happen. And I know David Brain has spoken very highly of this, and I don't know if what was that game that David Brain basically used this with the it was about a bit it was kind of a bit it had like different characters, and if there's a tie, this one character would win, except that David Brain's one was like a quick 10-minute filler. I didn't have. I put that Admiral Tiebreaker as an option when David was a bit. He was quite keen on me having that as the part of the main rules, and I think he was right. Actually, that should be part of the game. Should be the admiral wins, whoever he is, if it's a tie, because then that player can try to. Well, it gives every player. Well, almost every player, the chance to have a victory. If you're playing a 3-player game and the other 2 players are streets ahead of you, if you can get the admiral, you've got that chance of engineering your own victory by forcing a tie. Now, and this works because you are able to influence the scores of other players, even in a positive manner.
Exactly, and I'm very tempted to do that for Kingmaker, actually. Because the Chancellor of England is a very influential office, so I'm figuring that and I've introduced this idea of having a prestige point victory in Kingmaker. So at the end of your time limit, you look at how many prestige points each faction has. So I quite like the idea that at the end of the game, if two factions have got equal prestige, the Chancellor of England wins, whoever is the Chancellor, because that actually makes sense in the game. It means that, you know, if you've got two rival kings vying for power, neither has got enough power to actually control the kingdom, then it is quite likely that a lot of their supporters, through war weariness or whatever, might well say, well, let's have a compromise. We'll all agree that the Chancellor will actually take control. And I quite like that. It kind of fits with the theme. You effectively, what would happen politically is you'd appoint the noble who is the Chancellor as a kind of regent for the kings until such time as one of them dies.
The notion of X role wins all tie breaks is a really interesting one. I think so. Javier's come back and explained Lords of Zidit. There are 3 tracks. If you're lowest in the first track, you're eliminated. Everyone else you compare the second track for everyone. If you're lowest in the second track, you're eliminated, and then others advance to the third track. So there's going to be between 1 and 3 players left, I guess, for the final comparison, because it's a 3 to 5 player game. So basically, you don't want to necessarily be first in tracks 1 or 2, but you certainly don't want to be last.
Yes.
And you do want to be first on track 3, unless whoever is first on track 3 was eliminated already for the reasons stated above.
Yes, that sounds really interesting. That's a more complex method of this what was that game? Oh God, I can't remember the game.
Surely on track 3, there is
two tracks. Having two, you score victory points in two themes, and your actual score is your lowest score of those 2 themes. So you may do really, really, really well on, I don't know, building buildings, but you don't do very well on traveling to different locations. So it's your traveling to different locations that is your score. It's a kind of Reiner Knizia type scoring mechanism, isn't it? You have 4 colors, and your actual score is the lowest you've got in the 4 colors.
Or you could restate that as saying you're scoring how many sets you have.
Yes.
Which is mechanically identical.
So, yes, exactly.
I mean, it seems to me that with Javier's example of Lords of Zidit, you could still tie on track 3 potentially. Alan Outson says another reason to play solo games is much less chance of tying. So you had a few examples that you wanted to take us through. Shall we continue with those examples and work through them?
Well, we've done a lot of them already. Actually, we've done most of them.
If there's a couple left, then let's go through them.
Yeah, okay. I've this little game Parade.
Oh yes, by is that by Knizia?
No, it's Naoki Homa. It's actually it's a little old Japon brand game, so it's Japanese. Although it's got this lovely Alice in Wonderland artwork theme. Very simple game. Now, in this game, what you're trying to do is score the least points by. Ideally, you want to end the game with no cards in front of you. That's the ideal. But the problem is you will almost always have to take cards from the array of the parade that comes out in front of you, and so you want to have the least cards in front of you at the end of the game. The tie break in this round is that you have the fewest number of cards in front of you. So that's another one of those examples where it fits with the theme of the. So the theme of the card is not scoring cards. So if you've got the least cards in front of you at the end, then that's a very good tie break, well within the theme. Although I quite like the idea of ignoring the tiebreak in Parade anyway. And actually, that's one thing you can do as players. Of course, you can always just ignore the tiebreak, which is something that Charlie and I have often done when we're playing Terraforming Mars. So that's that one.
I mean, it feels like that's almost just a restatement of who was closest to the winning condition that's already been established.
Yes, San Juan is an example of. I think it's quite a good tiebreak, because in San Juan you're trying to you score points for all the cards in your display, and the tiebreak is having cards in hand and cards as goods on your display. Now that fits because it means that you have been more efficient, and I think somebody mentioned earlier having a tiebreak which is to do with efficiency is good, and I think that's right, because San Juan is about efficient card management, so the tiebreak really fits with that.
But in the example of cow buyer, if you've got more money, does that mean that you've been inefficient because you've got so much money, but you've not bought the cows, or does it mean that you've been efficient at making money?
Yes, I agree. I think there are games which have tiebreaks which don't fit in that way, in that you should have spent your action differently in order to win the game, and the fact that you missed spending your action, you missed doing that action, meant you tied, and then you won it on the tiebreak. That just feels, if that happens, it feels kind of wrong to me. So if the game is definitely about making sure you've scored the victory points, I'm trying to think of examples that have got tie breaks.
So can you explain your example in the terms of cow buyer? So let's say in cow buyer, it's a worker placement game. You go to the cow buying action, or you go to the money laundering action.
Yes. If
your gangsters buying cows, I don't know what's going on.
If the whole game is about buying cows, and the whole, and maybe there are other things to do with money as well in the game. If you're gangsters, you have to pay off the people who are trying to blackmail you or whatever, because you didn't buy those cows, you stole them. They're blackmail. So you have to pay them off. So in which case there are other uses for money, but the whole point of the game is to get the cows. So I think that in that case, I would prefer to not have a tiebreak, or have a tiebreak like you were saying earlier of start player wins or something like that, or quality of cows. Most steers. We've got the same number of cows.
I mean, it depends.
That would be better. Not money in that case, because the game is all about the cows. It's not about the money. Yeah.
I mean, what if? Okay, so this is completely random, but what if you had essentially a random tiebreak? Okay, let's say that every cow in the game has a certain number of, they're all white with black dots, let's just pretend. And then the person who's got the cow, maybe all the cows have a number. Let's say there's 100 cows in them. It goes from 1 to 100, and then they're all shuffled together. But then in case of a tiebreak, the person with the highest number wins. And then it could be like, okay, some of the higher number cows, okay, you want that, but really all the cows are similar unless there's a tiebreak.
I think that only works. I think that works best if you're, say, auctioning cows, or you have opportunities to get the higher valued cows. I think, and in fact, I think if as a game designer, I'd be looking at not having numbers. If that's going to be a core part of the game, I think the game becomes all about getting the best cow. It becomes like having a cow show. You're having and you're actually trying to win the cow show. So you may have you may have a dozen cows, but all your cows are pretty rubbish, and I've got only 3, but mine are really great. So I'm going to win on the fact that I've got the best quality cow. I've got the best breeding cow. There was that sheep sheep sale, wasn't there, from a couple of weeks ago, where there was an auction sheep which was like auctioned for something like 250,000 quid or something, because it was like the best breeding sheep ever or something. So if it's that type of game, then you don't need a tie break. You're using quality rather than quantity. So we're changing the nature of the game from calf to steer. It's all about getting the best steer. You're getting the cow that makes the best steak, so it's
Or
the
maybe it's
quality that
just,
counts.
you know, yeah. So yeah, we've got random tie breaks, and there are
Yes.
such examples
Oh,
in
yeah.
Arboretum with the growing the tree. What's Arboretum's tiebreak? Is Arboretum the one about growing the tree, where basically there's a game out there where it's all about growing trees, and then if you're tied at the end, I mean, I know you've got Arboretum, but I'm not expecting you to run off and find it right now. But if you are tied at the end, then it says in the rules you plant a tree, and after something like 1 year, you check whose tree is the tallest.
Highest. That's nice.
Oh, it's after 10 years.
After 10 years. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. I like that.
That was only in some language versions.
I see. Yes.
Okay. But that's basically, in some ways, telling you, well, if you really need to have a tiebreaker, then do this ridiculous thing. And if
that's
you
not really a tiebreaker,
don't want one. So, I mean, how do you feel about those kinds of things? Because there are, some joke things, like things where they say, if you're still tied, unleash a wildebeest, and the last person who survives is the winner.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Well, it obviously depends on if it's a nice light-hearted game, then that's very appropriate. I was the second tiebreak as well. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, for Arboretum. Apparently they have and I can't remember what the first one is, but okay. In the German version, you win a tie by having the most colored trees played in your park. And then what happens?
I'm not really in favor as a game designer just random tie breaks just because somebody felt you needed a tie break. I'd rather say a positive paradigm. We tie, we share the victory. I think does Chakra have? Does Chakra have? I think Chakra has shared victory. And I like because Chakra is all about meditation and so it feels right. You don't want to have a tie break in there. It's much better to have have a shared victory. I think with Terraforming Mars, the reason they stuck the tiebreaker in was because they didn't want to have any ties. They just felt that.
Yeah, I think it's about the audience, isn't it?
It definitely is about the audience. Yeah. Chakra has no winners. Yeah.
We've got a question from Javier who asks if there's any sorts of secret identity tie breaks. So a game where you're given a secret objective, but that secret objective isn't for main victory. It's just, okay, if you've reached the end and everyone's got the same score, then you check your secret tiebreaker.
That's an interesting idea. I
mean,
I don't recall of any game.
I don't know how that would work functionally, because if player A's secret type, I guess player A, I guess it could work. Like player A's tiebreaker order is first you compare the money, then you compare the steel, then you compare the plastic. And so player A, whereas player B might be plastic, steel, money, in which case first you'd compare money to plastic, then you'd compare steel to steel, then you'd compare plastic to money.
In a way, that sounds like a really neat idea, but I suspect that would be more like a main game mechanic, actually. So I like that idea, actually. It's really quite fun. So in other words, the game is all about trying to find out what the player's secret objective actually is. And you're trying to disguise, as you play, you're trying to disguise what your secret objective is. I like that. That's quite a nice idea, but I feel that's more like a main game mechanic.
Yeah, because I guess a tie break feels like it has to have. You don't want to have to bother with it cognitively. It shouldn't take a lot of loads. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, I agree. So that's why I'm not desperately in favour of converting everything to money type of things, because that just is faffy at the end.
But at the same time, it makes sense. Like, it's okay if you're in this unusual situation that everyone has exactly the same score, then okay, let's convert every remaining thing and just convert it, like you said in Energy Empire manner. Like, add up all your resources, but half your money.
It makes sense in Energy Empire, because that's a relative. Well, it's a 90-minute or so game. But what you don't want to have. You don't want to have a half-hour game where it takes 10 minutes to work out what the tiebreak is. So in that sense, yeah, it has to fit. I mean, I think in our game, which is not published, it was Echo Locations, which is our Dolphins game, which I think you've played.
Yes,
Ben? Yes,
by you and Neil.
That's right. We were toying about having some form of complicated tiebreak in that, but again, that's all about positivity, and dolphins being very positive creatures. And so I think we decided in the end that we wouldn't have a tiebreak. Everybody, if it's a tie, you will win. And that, for that type of game, which is only about 50 minutes to an hour play, it fits quite well with that. It's not a long, huge resource management type of game where a tiebreak might be more appropriate. I think maybe what it is about the level of competitiveness. Is that if it's if you're talking about really relatively complex, heavy, competitive game, then the tiebreak becomes quite important. And perhaps on that scale, going back to a more light social game.
Good night, CD. Good night. I hope you enjoyed this bedtime board game bladder, because it is CD's based in New Zealand.
Ah, right.
You see, that's why it's called the Busy Bedtime Board Game Bladder. There's a logic to the madness. You know, there's people all over the world.
Exactly.
Edie, I don't think you're. Yeah, exactly. It's specifically for CD. But yeah, I think let's go through the rest of your examples, Alan.
Right, I've only got a couple more actually.
Yeah,
I've got one more, which was I think we may have already example, but we may have already covered it. I think it's the same type of thing, which was, again, this is Paris New Eden. Ah, yes, I know what I wanted to have this one. Paris New Eden, as you can see, it's all about. Oops, if I can push it through a bit. Have people played this? It's all about gritty post-apocalyptic stuff.
It looks very cute.
It's really quite a fun. It's quite a fun game. It's 2 to 4, 45 minutes, so it's not a long game. It's you are basically trying to recruit survivors of the apocalypse in order to form your new community, and you're trying to get certain specific specialists. So you want medics, and occasionally you might want people you might want soldiers for security, and these are represented by these cute little dice. The colors are the specialists. So the blue guy that the blue guy there is a peasant farmer. The green guy is what's the green guy? Technologist or something. I can't remember. Anyway, so there's various different roles that these people have, and they can acquire relevant equipment. And you have to have farmers in order to feed your people. But there are also a whole range of people you might get who are basically just people who are not specialists at all, and they add to your population, but they don't do anything else. So they're not actually kind of helpful in that sense. But they are people and they are survivors. So although they're not useful to you directly, they are relevant. Like most of us here who might not be very good in a post-apocalyptic world. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. So the tiebreak here is how big your population is. It's not how many specialists you've got, it's how big your population is. Yeah. So if you've got a lot of what you might call useless mouths. You have to feed them. That's actually good for the tiebreak, and I like that. So it's saying this is a humanitarian crisis we're in here. It's not just let's get loads of soldiers and medics and people like that, but also all the other people do still have value, and that's nice. That's what I mean by a tiebreak, which fits with the theme. That's a really good one. I like that. It also looks. It's also got one of these very. I don't know if you can see the board. It's got this very. Where are we? Very kind of. It's got a post-apocalyptic board, quite fussy in a way.
I mean, this post-apocalyptic world is very colourful and cheery.
It's a very colourful world, and if and on they've taken the advantage of sticking a nice. Full.
So if you want to stick that up on your wall or something, you could.
Exactly,
I guess
you could do. Yes, that's what we did. That's what we did with the Ming Voyages, and I had somebody. We had a backer of the Ming Voyages who said she didn't actually like. She ended up not liking the game, which is a bit of a shame. But she loved the artwork, so she's put the board. She's put the board on the back on her wall. So she put the back of the board on her wall because the artwork was good. So you can use games for very many different purposes.
Hi, Rowan. It's lovely to see you join us. We're kind of wrapping up at this point.
Yep, I've used all my examples.
Like, I think that what I think that's Alex's point. What if the tiebreaker was intended to incentivize the players? I really feel like this. A lot of stuff that people are saying should be done within the main rules of the game. I mean, the main rules of the game, that's what they are for. Frankly, if you wanted to do something like that, yes, I know you've made a point that you can't actually tie in Catan because it's a race game. It's the first two. I think it's 10. Is it 11 points? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, that kind of stuff, to my mind, if there's something that you really need to incentivize via the rules of the game, then if it's being incentivized via a tiebreak method, then unless like the tiebreak is the natural state of affairs, then why even have it? I mean, I could imagine a game where the main scoring was, okay, you score 1, 2, or maybe 3 points in a typical game, and then the person with the most points wins, but you really expect it to be a tie, in which case the person with the happiest workers wins. Let's say it was a game in which you were rounding down your money to the nearest million, and then let's say we're actually playing with sensible numbers of money, so as in you do have single digits of money, but let's say you rounded it up or down to the nearest 100, so you're probably going to tie unless someone's really managed to, if someone's managed to break 100, then you really need to break 100 as well at that point. Or maybe you want it to be more discreet, whatever. But the point is that, then having it be a second level objective, then you kind of know that it's really properly incentivizing the player. Because I feel if it's just relegated to the tiebreak, is that really going to incentivize the players to do that thing? And if you're just saying, the person who made the most trades, like my issue is that here, firstly, it's incentivizing something that seems to be completely different to the main game. It has to be in keeping with the theme. Yes, I know that Catan is a trading game. It's about trading and getting the best resources, but secondly, then that tiebreak, it requires you to add this extra component. It requires you to keep track of those trades in some manner. How do you do that? That seems now fiddly. And
the cognitive load needs to be very light for a tiebreaker. For a tiebreaker which is just used as a small thing in the unlikely event that there's a tie, then you do something simple and straightforward that everybody can see and know about, and you can see who wins. That's good. If it's much, I mean, that's why I put the King of Siam in there, because in a way, although Pierre has called it a tie break, and there's a whole series of different tie breaks, in a sense, because in that game with experienced players, ties are quite likely. They do become an integral part of the game. So in that game, you may be committing towards not permitting the British to control Siam simply because you want to win the tiebreak. So in that sense, it's not a minor add-on in case there happens to be an unlikely tie. It's actually a key main rule part of the game. So I think possibly that's just a nomenclature thing. Then maybe describing that as a tiebreaker isn't necessarily what you should do. It's more than a simple tiebreaker. It's actually an integral part of the game itself.
Yeah, I guess it's different to know when something becomes. Yeah, I guess it's like, what do you expect? What does the designer expect to happen? And Alan Alton makes an interesting distinction, which is you can view it from two perspectives. Either it's passive and you look at some retroactive things, who actually won, who had the most money, who had whatever, or it's active, where some or all of the players continue.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing. Forcing the game to fall to the tiebreak that best suits you seems like an interesting decision space. Javier says, are there any games where you have to tie in order to win? I mean, I know opposites games where the highest the highest not tied player is the winner. So if there's a tie, then they are ignored until they get someone who's got a unique score.
That's a good idea.
I don't know anywhere where you can't win alone, but only joint victories are allowed. That's quite an interesting one.
Well, one of the things I've been wrestling with Kingmaker is that if you've got like a 5-player game of Kingmaker, it's quite unlikely within a time limit that you'll win on your own. Well, certainly it's quite unlikely. Well, unless you're just doing how many prestige points have we all got. But if you're actually going for a prestige point victory, which is governed by having a specific number of prestige points, depending on the number of players. Like with 5 players, you need something like 13 prestige points or something. I can't remember what the exact figure is at the moment. And you need 20 as an alliance. So in that case, an alliance victory is much more likely, I think, than a solitary victory. And in a way, because Kingmaker is a political game, I wanted players to grasp that and run with that idea. It's okay to have an alliance victory, and in a sense, if you and I have an alliance, Bez, but you've got the king and I'm a hanger-on, while we both win, we both actually know that it's more your victory than mine because you had the king. You know and let the players figure that out. That's fine. So I like persuading players to have that kind of approach is useful, I think. But it depends on the nature of the game, because Kingmaker is a political game, not really a military game. And putting that across is quite difficult. That's key, I think. If it was a more military game, then it would be every man for himself, and you'd have a different approach to an alliance, I think. I'm not sure there's a conclusion to that one, but I think it may be quite hard to get people in a lot of games, because of the style of game, to agree to a kind of alliance victory type of thing.
Sometimes there is no conclusion. I'm just actually looking at the rule sheets for my games, and Jeroen says joint victories would indeed give risk a new dimension. looking at here's Wibble. If I explicitly say there can be multiple winners. In Alpha, no, this is Grabble. I just did not mention it at all. I still don't think I've ever seen a tiebreak, but that's pretty big oversight in the rules, to be fair. Same as alphabetical. Now, categorical is a really interesting one because you're moving it forwards and backwards along this line. And in theory, the moment that you flip a card, before you replace it, normally during the course of the game, there are 2 cards visible only for about half a second before it is covered, because you flip, cover, and then clap, and then you're allowed to shout again. So what happens here is, with these cards, once you're an out, there's going to be 2 visible, and there's 5 cards on the table. So there will always be at least one of those 2 cards which is closer to one player than the other. And so it suggests that they've managed to bring it slightly closer to themselves.
So that tiebreak fits exactly, because that's a physical game. The tiebreak fits with the mechanics, which is what you want with a good tiebreak.
Yeah, basically, absolutely. If you pull it all the way to yourself, you score an entire point. But if it's slightly closer to yourself, it's almost like you've got a third of a point.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's my favorite tiebreak, the one that I'm proudest of, is Kitty Cataclysm, which I don't know if you've had to use this tiebreak. Where in Kitty Cataclysm, the player who most recently took a turn is the winner. And then I cheekily say, if it's still a tie, then you haven't understood the rules. And I was very proud of that because, that is something that will never be a tie. And it kind of fits the game because when you're playing the game, you can be the one who ends it by stealing all the cards from the player to your left.
Yes.
You can be the one who ends it by taking all the cards from the deck and taking more than there are remaining. And so in this game, I want to reward people for action. I want to reward people for doing those things, for ending the game. And if you've taken a gamble and then, you didn't quite manage to do it, well, you had the audacity and the gumption to finish the game. So by that virtue, I think you should be the one to get it. And hey, if you're not one of the tied players, then it's the one to your right or whatever, the most previous player to take a turn, as the rules say. And I'm also proud of that because there is no secondary tiebreak needed. We have covered so much. Do we have anything more that you want to really get into, Alan? Or
no, I think we've rambled around quite nicely on this, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been a fun talk, and I hope that people who've been listening to this, even though we've not really come to any solid conclusions, it's just nice to get this stuff out. For free DML, where you're putting letters into a grid and can score words horizontally and vertically. That sounds lovely. I mean, I guess that's whether there's a tie or not, it must be mentioned in the rules. When that's omitted, it's confusing and players have the right to know. I'm very sorry about alphabetical and Grabble. That was bad rules on my part. And when will they be reprinted?
We're in good company. We're in very good company, Bez. I was at a talk last night by Volko Runa, a very famous war game designer, who said one of his cards has got terrible wording in it that if people misinterpret it, which is perfectly reasonable for them to do, it actually breaks the game.
We are always trying to get better. And Alan, I don't know why you'd think anything would be a short conversation. Like I said to have you, I could frankly talk for 40 minutes about one line in a rule book. I believe that.
Hey, maybe that's next week's topic then.
And what about me? Like, come on, I'm good at talking. So we covered so much. We talked about promenades, about beaches, about squares, about enjoying the sunsets with parents, about playing new L games, about tie breaks. Oh man, yeah, right. So about reflecting everything. Oh wow. Um, yeah, I see what you did there. Very nice, Alex.
I think we should randomly go on, I don't know, duration. There you go.
I think that if there's a tie, maybe it should be maybe here the tie should go to the first one to happen.
I think the tie has to be the size of the audience. Well, I mean, it fits in with the strategy.
But then that might need a multiple tie break. I mean, it should either be the.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've decided that tie breaks need to reflect everything you did in the actual game. We've decided that terraforming Mars is a bit rubbish in that area. We've talked about that you've got games where you've got to have the most or least at a certain point, or you've got race games where you've got to be the first to achieve something or potentially last to achieve something, or when someone else is the first to achieve that thing, they lose. Anyway, so the point is that, you're having where you've got a score, that's the only place where a tiebreak works, is needed. If there is, but even there, if it's a race game, you might still be, can people achieve that at the same time? Is that an issue? Do you just convert everything to points? About granularity affecting how much you might want a tie, because frankly, you know what? I guess with Energy Empire, at least that tie break makes sense. So if Layla and I actually managed to get 172, it would be like, oh wow. Well, okay, let's look into manual, let's see what happens. And then we would be probably pleased to discover, although now it wouldn't be a discovery now that you've said it, although frankly I have read the entire rule book, but it's just when you're replaying a game you don't necessarily remember all these things. And that's the thing, that's a tie break. If it has to be part of something on your mind for the full game, that's adding cognitive load, whereas if it's just something that's added at the end, it should reflect what you've done without adding any extra components or stuff to keep track of.
I think, I'll interject briefly. The terraforming Mars, when we had the one money on the tie break, I think we had to look up the tie break, and I lost because I played a card for nothing in the last round. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have just kept it, and then I should have used it for money instead. But anyway, yes, it's one of those things.
I mean, I know that Javier talked about Ted Alspach's deck of Tiebreaker, which is quite similar to Start Player, where arbitrarily decides a tie player in a silly way. But I think that's a terrible thing to do, because if it was actually tallest player wins, I mean, I think for Start Player, if it's like, okay, the person whose name is first in the alphabet starts, if you genuinely feel like there's no advantage to going first, then that's fair enough. Yeah. But if it's, okay, the player whose name is first in the alphabet wins, then that feels like, what? I thought we were playing a game where it was based on our decisions.
But that's just a bit of fun, isn't it? It's not a serious thing. I think that's kind of key. If there is that idea that you can have a relatively frivolous, that's true. If it's a frivolous game, then you can have a random tiebreak. There's no problem with that. It fits in with the
like
again. We're saying it fits in with the type of game. Yeah.
If there was, I do prefer the rule that I came up with for Kitty Cataclysm, but let's say that were not possible for whatever reason. Let's say it were a version of Kitty Cataclysm. Let's say it's called Doggy Positivity. And so in Doggy Positivity, everyone's playing their cards at the same time and are trying to get into groups of other dogs. because dogs want to be friends. They just want to be good dogs, and it's about how many people can you be the same as, and the more people you are the same as, the more. And maybe it's a completely ridiculous game. It's a game about kind of table talk, and it lasts about 5 minutes. And at the end of that, then you say, if there's a tie, then everyone does a dog bark, and the person with the best dog bark wins. Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And you don't want to do that. So we've talked. Alan made a really good point about active tie breaks, adding stuff to the game. Okay, you do this other thing. I guess the problem with having penalty shootouts, something analogous to that in a board game, is that it is kind of a new set of rules to learn, unless you have some subset of the rules that can be easily taken out to be its own subgame. Like, I don't know many games where that could actually work, where the skill of shooting a goal or of defending your goal is at least a subset. Even if it's a small subset, it's at least a subset of what's going on in the main game. But I can't think of anywhere where you could even do that if you really wanted to. I mean, yeah, I guess like if you've tied in Agricola, maybe you now play a tiny mini game where you can only play on the first on the basic board, and then you play one round. I don't know, like maybe you've got like a little.
With Terraforming Mars, you could be the first person to score another terraforming point or something. I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
The point is, the game's ended when all the terraforming is done.
And Sate says this is why they never use tie breaks. They don't ever remember them, and they feel like, meh, looking it up and seeing an arbitrary thing doesn't make either person feel more or less like winners.
Yeah.
So you just tie.
I agree with that. That's a good sentiment. I think I would tend to disregard tie breaks in most of the types of games I'm playing. I mean, in tournaments you can't do that. In tournaments, because you have to have a winner. Therefore, I can see that it's very, very competitive play.
And I am going to say, in tournaments, no, you don't have to have a winner. Magic the Gathering, you don't always have a winner. Like in tournament play, sometimes it times out.
Oh yes, that's true. But there will be an overall tournament winner, won't there?
Sure, there will be an overall tournament winner, but you might say, "Oh, I went 3-2-1," which normally means 3 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie.
Yeah, sure, okay, yeah, you could.
And I have definitely.
In fact, in war game tournaments, you can have ties in a round. Yes, you can. Oh, that's a good. Actually, I didn't mention that, did I? You can have draw. You can have a draw in like a game of DBM or something. You can actually have a tie where you both armies break at the same time. Which I suppose we did talk about that in terms of both losing. But you could tie on the same number of points at the end of the round, and you don't need a winner. I mean you can have that.
I mean, we could do these things, but
boxing.
I mean, that just seems like you're bringing out in totally different skills, and that doesn't seem like what it's set up for.
It should be the Ming Voyages unboxing. Who can unbox Ming Voyages the quickest? There you go. That's a tie break.
Oh, as in who reboxes the
reboxing.
Game bits?
Reboxing, yes.
Oh.
You'd need 2 copies though, wouldn't you?
Well, you'd need to rebox it, but you'd need to have them both in the similar starting situation. I'm not. So you rebox it, then you time it with its stopwatch, then you unbox it, then the other person reboxes it, and we see who's fastest. It feels like a bit of faff, to be honest. What tiebreakers are possible? All sorts of things. When's the? I mean, let's try and go through all these. Actually, if I just do this, so have we answered all these questions? What tiebreakers are possible? I think we've covered quite a lot of that. When is a tiebreaker not needed? basically if it's so granular or if the notion of the game is friendly enough. Basically, if your target audience probably doesn't want a tiebreaker.
And I think for political games, for our political games, I think arranging to not have a tiebreaker is quite fun.
And the winner is the person who leaves the others to rebox in order to make dinner.
Right, yes.
Or impressionist painting boxing. How can a tiebreaker be in keeping with the style of the game? I mean, that's the key thing that we've decided. It needs to reward a key activity. It needs to not add loads of extra rules. It needs to, if the game is light, the tiebreaker should be, I mean, super simple, cognitively easy to understand.
To sum that one up, in a way, the golden goal is a better tiebreaker than penalty shootout. Because it's much more in keeping with the style of the game. It's saying all the skills are relevant for the golden goal. Whereas with penalty shootout, the reason it feels kind of a bit wrong is because it's only exercising those two skills. Ability to shoot.
I'm enjoying the Twitch chat today.
That's lovely.
And it's not just in being in keeping with the style of the game. There's other things involved in making it a good tiebreaker. Obviously, you don't want to add any cognitive load mid-game to have to retroactively say, hey, who made more trades?
Yeah.
But also, it feels like it wants to reward the things that you were going for anyway. And I guess the reason that you could argue that penalty shootouts are a better tiebreaker than golden goal is because that particular tiebreaker doesn't add too much length to the game.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I agree with that. The purist in me still likes the golden goal, but I can see that what happens if nobody can score? If you've got a 0-0 draw, it's gone to 30 minutes of extra time, and it's still 0-0, and you're thinking, this game could go on for another 4 hours. What would actually, could somebody find out what's the maximum duration they've had for a golden goal? That's interesting, wasn't it? I'll actually look that up.
Yeah, it seems the goalie's off at a certain point.
Well, that's a point, yeah.
Like maybe you play 90 minutes and then, okay, golden goal, okay, another 90 minutes, and then you take the goalies off, and then everyone has to take, or maybe every...
that favours David Beckham, doesn't it? That favours David Beckham.
Okay, what if, instead of taking people off, what if you get to put another person on? Because then that favours having better reserves. That would be an interesting one. And so every 10 minutes, you get to put an extra person on the team until you've got like 20 against 20 instead of 11 against 11. That would be interesting. Multiple.
Trying to find out if they were...
And when should you use multiple tie breaks? You were the one who suggested this, so I think for me, it's like... Frankly, I feel like just one tie break, and that should be it. It's like just convert everything to one. If you can't work it out with just the cows, then either, or even in Terraforming Mars, a good tiebreaker to me, if you really wanted to have an elimination tournament, if I were right now, based on what I know of it, running a Terraforming Mars knockout tournament, I would be like, okay, at the end of the game, we're converting everything to these resources, and I guess that could still be a tiebreak. So at that point, we give half a point, like essentially advantage to one of the players. That's the only way to have an ultimate tiebreak, isn't it? To have someone in turn order or someone with a particular role.
Yeah.
Because those are the only things that you can say these will never be the same. I guess, although when I think about it, sorry, I'm just thinking about Plus. Okay, you know my game Plus, Alan. We played it on the ferry.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was actually thinking that this might be the first game in my cheap tuck box range where I print like 500 copies, and but it's priced so that I can afford to do that. Although I might maybe should wait until I see the fallout of Brexit to price things accordingly. Anyway, so in Plus, every turn is basically like a tiebreak. Who shouted the number first? And
Yes.
we started off and Fabio had some issues with like slapping the card and said, I don't feel comfortable slapping someone else's hand or potentially having my hand slapped, which I totally understand. But when you've got to say who shouted the number first, it's possible that two people shout at exactly the same time. In Wibble, there are tiebreaker rules for that mid-game. Whoever shouted the shortest word, if there's a thing, or whoever was first in the alphabet, and if you're still not sure, you just shuffle them in and you deal out 2 more cards. But if you're slapping your hand on a card, that is like an ultimate tiebreak, because one hand is going to be on top of the other if you're at least slapping the middle of the card.
Yeah. Physical games, there are difficulties like that, especially now. But those will be resolved once we've got rid of COVID, isn't it? Really?
Red 7, you have to be winning by the end of your turn in order to stay in. And golden goal is only valid during a limited extra time. And if you were adding more people, you could have, we've suggested resizable goals, extra balls, just to force people to score something. And eventually having 347 versus 347, then the ref thinks it seems to play for. And, yep. Yeah, anyway, I think we've, sort of finished. We've broken this topic, you could say. So that is our wrap up. Do you have anything left to say?
I'm absolutely fine. I think we've had a really good, thorough discussion.
It has been lovely.
It has been great. Enjoyed it a lot. And thank you very much to everybody who's made these wonderful comments. It's been very helpful to get us thinking about things more.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been in the comments, especially thanks to Alex, Xate, Alan Oughton, Jess, who was in here earlier, like all the people who've come through, Doug, CD, Jay Foolsguard, Rowan, Chris. I feel like I might be missing a couple of people. Oh, Elaine popped in. And anyone who's lurking and Javier, oh my gosh, Javier, I'm so sorry. It's because I look at the Twitch thing and then I use that as a memory aid. I'm sorry, Javier. Javier, taught us so much about Lords of Ziddit and hopefully maybe encouraged Chris to play it with me. And although I think it might not be McCall's type of thing, but maybe Chris, myself, and Layla could play it. And Xate says Javier should join the Twitch chat. Yeah, Javier, I think that it is, even though I do it on YouTube for to allow people to join in, there is a lot of chat that I don't necessarily put up on the screen. And if you want to follow us, then I am stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bigcards.com, buy my stuff, twitter.com/stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbybez, twitch.tv/stuffbybez, facebook.com/thingsbybez is a thing, and stuffbybez@gmail.com is my email address if you wish to find that. And if you wish to find Alan, then that would be
surprisedaygames.co.uk. I am on Twitter as Benthamfish. Most other places I am Benthamfish, but mostly I am Alan at surprisedaygames.co.uk on email. Best way to get me is email.
And again, thank you to everyone who's been following along. Thank you to everyone who makes it such a delight, because honestly, in these times of not being able to go out and sit in a pub or have like 10 people over to the house, it feels like a little bit of a community, and it's really lovely doing these things together. So thank you very much, everyone, and obviously thank you to you, Alan Paull.
Thank you, Bears. It's been an absolute pleasure, as ever.
And yeah.
Do we know what we can do next week?
Oh, you mean in 2 weeks?
2 weeks' time? 2 weeks' time, fortnight's time.
I was
We'll
thinking that we could just kind of go have a ponder about like different mechanisms, like just start talking about different structures or different types of board games. If people do have topics that they would like us to cover, then feel free to suggest things. If you want to suggest a guest. And for now, I want to say, what are we looking forward to? Hopes and ambitions. It's over to you for this final section. And yeah, this is where I invite everyone watching, whether now or in the future, to share. What are you looking forward to? I am looking forward to maybe drinking or eating something soft, maybe having a bit of something that might soothe my throat. And maybe today, even though it is very overcast, I think I will, because it doesn't look like it's going to rain. I am going to, go up the hill and then go down the hill and maybe go up the hill and go down the hill again. I'll maybe go up the big hill and then go down and then go up the little hill.
So
and then
just
come down.
The Duke of York manoeuvre.
Alan Houghton is looking forward to playing Lux Eterna for the first time.
Have fun, Alan. If you have any questions, yeah, you could ask me.
Oh, Sisyphus. Go and look for Jack and Jill. But that's the thing, social distancing. I can't go searching for Jack and Jill. It will just be more rolling rocks on my own.
You could wave at them in the distance.
Yeah, like if I see someone carrying a pail of water, I promise I will wave at them and shout at them, "Are you Jack or Jill?"
You'll just surprise them and they'll fall down, though. That's what happens. I understand.
Man, tumbling down.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
I am looking forward to actually tomorrow. What day are we on? Tuesday. Tomorrow evening, I am doing a live stream with the BGG demoing of the Ming Voyages and the March of Progress. This is going to be something of a challenge because I've got 25 minutes to do both games. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock if anybody's interested.
Board Game Geek is. So that's not part of the Essen thing. Is that like a pre-recorded thing that they're going to do?
It's a separate live stream. I'm not exactly sure where it fits in, actually, to be honest. It's a thing that they set up ages ago. They're just doing a whole couple of days. I think it's tomorrow and Thursday. A whole couple of days just doing live streams on new games. So I thought I might as well.
That's pretty cool. I'll have to check in with them once my next thing is out. Alan Houghton is aiming to build a base for the robotic painting machines that can wander off into the fields.
Oh.
And I am I'm going to actually check to see if there is any cool people that I know to potentially raid, because let's see if Zanoano's up again. Oh no, the only person that I know is Robotron from the Dark Room. Yeah, we could pop in there. I want to say share and spread the word. I am looking forward to one of my next streams, which if you've forgotten stuff, it's right there, stuffbybears.com/streams. And tomorrow I am getting to talk to Emma, which should be quite fun. Oh, and tonight we are playing something. Oh, we've decided that we're going to play Top Tail for a bit of time, and then like maybe after Top Tail we might play that for like 40 minutes or so, and then we'll play a quick bit of Nano Muckle at the end. Nano Muckle is only 8 cards.
Oh right.
It's like over almost before you know it. But yeah, tomorrow I'm trying to stay neutral with Emma. This is going to be just a ridiculous thing. We will probably talk a little bit about Girls Game Shelf, which is community that Emma's become part of, Mzaya, and inspired by one of the Pointless Parrots podcasts, we are, if Emma is not neutral about something, so if Emma expresses positivity or negativity, then I win a point, and vice versa.
But
so
what's the tie break, though? What's the tie break?
Oh, we've not got a tie break.
Emma wins any ties. There you go. I'll supply that free of charge.
Who wins any ties?
Emma wins any ties.
Okay, Emma wins any ties. Okay, yeah, sure. That makes sense. Like the guest wins ties. Yeah, and we've got to make Emma speak Dutch for sure. Okay, apparently that's. I mean, I assume that's not a prerequisite to Xate's love. That's just, additional love on top of the love that already exists. Anyway, so there is tonight we are playing games at 8 p.m. Every day we are talking at 10 a.m. And I am very excited for Emma. I'm also excited actually to chat to Colvin and Chris and myself. That will be nice. But Ryan Estrada, I'm super excited to chat to Ryan Estrada. So yeah, that's going to be a new series where I compare comics to other things. Right. I mean, sorry, board games to other things. But we're comparing comics to board games. And the next time, we could compare war games to board. It's part of a subset. We've already talked enough about war games.
We have, yeah.
Anyway, so this is where I hate saying goodbye, because this is honestly such a highlight for today. Thank you for making it lovely. Lots of love, and there is only one thing left to do, which is to say bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go to do bye, 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 bye. Bedankt voor het streamen in het Netherlands. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.
Bye.